It happened a week after my sister had gone missing. A raining evening in late October. My mother was still setting the table for her as she was convinced she might walk in at any moment. "It's my fault for yelling," she said. "If anything happens to her, it's my fault." Since she was just a kid, my sister had excelled at school. A promising future awaited her. Everyone said so. As for me, well, people told me to be nice to her, as if I was destined to depend on her. When she broke the news that she wanted to be a journalist, my parents didn't take her seriously at first. "You might as well become a haymonger if you're so desperate for a dead career. Don't expect us to support you if you don't take your education seriously." They were just trying to keep her on the right path, I'm sure, so that she wouldn't waste her talents. But what they didn't know was that this was the only path Allison had ever wanted to walk. Watching her talk about it, I was convinced that she could bring the fire back to journalism with her determination alone. Nothing could be truly dead with Allison around. They got into a big fight and Allison left. Like my parents, I assumed she'd be back when she cooled down. But she was gone. When the police informed us that they found her phone and wallet in a ditch, they told us to prepare for the worst. Runaways often ditch their phone, but never their wallets, said an officer. From his voice, it was clear that he wasn't expecting her to be found alive. It was after that conversation that I went for a walk to the protest of my parents, late at night, in the rain. I felt sorry for them. All they had left now was a screw-up, but they couldn't have even that. What then? Allison had left no clues on her social media, and none of her friends knew her whereabouts. She had just vanished, without a trace. Yet I felt that she was still out there somewhere. What sort of situation could Allison possibly fail to prepare for? She'd practiced self-defense for years and knew the details of the hundreds of crime stories by heart. I imagined her to be working on this story right now, about her perfect escape. Just as I pictured myself reading her book detailing it all, I noticed something. On the porch of an old house was an expertly carved jack-o'-lantern, looking incredibly lifelike. With the light flickering inside, it seemed almost like a soul, eager to escape to the grand beyond. There were others. An old man with a bushy beard, a woman with wrinkles and a cigarette in the corner of her mouth, and a girl. From a distance, I couldn't quite make it out. The light inside was much brighter than the others. The glow made the contours gently fade out. However, my gut told me I had to have a closer look. As I climbed the fence, I couldn't quite make it out. The light inside was much brighter than in the others. As I climbed the fence, I felt my pulse rising considerably. This was like something Allison would do, not me. I'd always been the sort of person to retreat into the kitchen at parties so that I wouldn't have to deal with too many people at once. And now I was trespassing. And for what? Some pumpkins? The lights were off inside the house. Presumably, the owners were out. There was no car in the driveway either. Still, once I was over the fence, I crawled across the lawn. You can never be too careful. I stopped for a bit when I imagined the owner slamming the door open, shotgun in hand, to find a stranger crawling across their property. They might take a shot at me out of plain fear. Well, the thought petrified me at first. I kept crawling, and I gazed up at the porch and saw my suspicions confirmed. The girl carved into one of them looked exactly like Allison. There was no mistaking it. The face of my lost sister had been carved into this pumpkin. The expression on her face was one of anger. Now close enough to touch it, I felt a wave of terror wash over me. As I stared into her face, I had the feeling that she was there, staring back at me. Whoever carved this, I realized, knew exactly what Allison looked like. It was too perfect to have been made with a picture as reference. Also, she hadn't been angry in any picture we had taken in the press, hopeful that someone would recognize her. Judging from the state of the pumpkin, it hadn't been long either. The others were in various stages of decomposition, soft and bulging, sweet scent of rot emanating from them. So entranced was I that I never noticed the door opening. A man with salt and pepper 5 o'clock shadow and a weathered fleece jacket looked at the stranger on his porch and smiled. You like that one, don't you? Frozen in shock, I wasn't able to get a single word out. He continued, Took me a while to carve that one. It's special to me, you know. It's my daughter. She passed away last spring. Allison had a twin? No. Even then, I'd know. This looks exactly like my sister, I said. The expression on his face changed barely. I couldn't work out what he was thinking. There's a man living a couple miles from here that's my spitting image. Friends often complain that I've walked straight past him on the street, and they just look confused when I tell them that's not me. That's Peter, the accountant. Seeing doppelgangers for the first time can be unnerving. Come in for a cup of tea. I'll show you some pictures of her. I thought about what Allison would do. Pictures? Well, if I saw pictures of someone who looked exactly like her, then I might believe it. It could just be a massive coincidence, but if he's lying... I looked back at the pumpkin. Allison, or this man's dead daughter, looked less angry than scared right now. It could just be the light. All right, I said, and picked up the pumpkin. For comparison, I added. The man laughed and said, All right, then. Inside, the smell was nearly unbearable. Apparently, the jack-o'-lanterns outside were just the fresh ones. Inside were a whole collection of rotten ones. Some looked more like puddles than anything else. Please excuse the mess, he said. After Jessica disappeared, my wife couldn't take it, and she left. Not much of a housekeeper, you see. I don't get many visitors. If I knew you were coming, I would have cleaned up the place. He brushed off some old newspapers from the couch and invited me to sit. Let me just find the album, he said, and left the room. I stared in the pumpkin in my hands, looking exactly like my overachieving sister. This time, however, she didn't seem to look into my eyes. Instead, she appeared to be gazing across my shoulders. I turned around to see a family photo hanging on the wall. One of the persons in the picture was definitely the owner of the house, but it must have been taken a long time ago. In all of them, he looked at least 20 years younger. Standing beside him were not a wife and a daughter, but two people I presumed to be his parents. An old man looking a bit like the owner, but with a great bushy beard, and an old woman with wrinkles and a stern expression on her face. They seemed somewhat familiar as well, like I'd seen them somewhere before. Suddenly, I felt as if my spine had spontaneously turned into ice. These two... They were the faces on the other lanterns. It then occurred to me that it might not be all that strange. I mean, if he carved the faces of his daughter, why not his parents as well? It did fit the theme, yet... Why did he choose to make their expressions so... terrified? I mean, it didn't make sense. It's not how you pay tribute to lost loved ones. It's an act of revenge. I decided I had to get out of there. I was taking the lantern with me. Just as I was about to leave, the owner returned. Hang on, he said. I have the pictures right here. Sorry for taking so long. I'm not all that organized, you see. That's all right, I said. I just got a text from my parents. I have to go home. I'm sorry. Perhaps I'll be back later. You're not taking my daughter with you, are you? His tone of voice made it seem like he was telling a joke. The punchline known only to himself. He stepped closer, and I tried to open the door. It was locked, and worse, I couldn't see a door latch. This door wasn't meant to keep people from coming in. It was meant to keep people from escaping. The owner withdrew a carving knife from his pocket and let out a high-pitched laugh. I hope you ain't much trouble as your sister. She really didn't want to stay here and keep me company, and she kept asking me all these questions. Turns out she had already figured out what I was doing, and yet she came in here alone. She had noticed pets disappearing and managed to trace it back to me. She was working on a story, an expose. Unfortunately for her, she didn't even know half of it. "Where is she?" I said, tears streaming down my face. He laughed again. "She's been right under your nose this whole time." I looked down at the pumpkin, at Allison's face. I saw that her expression had changed once more. She looked frightened and stared deep into my eyes as if pleading for me to escape. And then I noticed the decaying pumpkin spread across the room. Dogs, cats of various kinds. He had started with pets, then moved on to people, and my sister, my brilliant sister, had worked it all out. For a moment, I cursed her courage. Why'd she have to come here all by herself? Why couldn't she at least ask me to accompany her? If she did that, then she might still be... "Don't worry," said the man as he approached me. "I'll put you two side by side." He raised his carving knife, and as I braced myself for what would come next, the pumpkin in my hands exploded, its backside bursting onto the man with a shrill scream. He dropped the knife and wiped the burning hot wax off of his face. I was left holding only the face. Allison's face. This time she appeared to be smiling, and as fast as I could, I crouched down and grabbed the knife. I stuck it into his throat. He staggered back in shock and pulled it out, blood gushing from the wound, and he tried to stop, but it was too late. And then something strange happened. His skin seemed to turn a shade of orange. Little by little, he transformed until all that was left was a deformed, pumpkin-like mess on the floor with a crude imprint of a shocked face on the surface. Even his blood had disappeared, only a brass key remained next to what was left of him. I picked it up, and sure enough, it fit the lock. I still held on to the knife and what's left of my sister. My parents believe I carved it myself. I've never had the courage to tell them. And I'm not like my sister was. People were right. I depend on her. Even after all that, she was the one to save me. I decided to become a journalist. I mean, even if I've never be half as good as Allison, her fire lives on inside me. I choose to post this story here because you never know if there are others out there. I mean, even if you don't believe me, please keep my story in mind if you see a jack-o'-lantern out there that looks a bit too realistic. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and thank you for watching tonight's video, or listening to tonight's podcast. I want to tell you about one quick thing before we say goodbye for the evening, and that's going to be about the MrCreepyPasta plush. There's a brand new plush that's available, and this is going to be running on like every single video, I think, for at least a couple of weeks for the entirety of this campaign, because the plush is only available for a limited time. So if you guys head over to makeship.com, then you guys are able to get this MrCreepyPasta plush. It's super cool. I worked with the original person who designed my character to be able to create this plush, and I think it's something that you guys will really love. It glows in the dark, which is really cool, and he's super soft and cuddly. So it's makeship.com, makeship.com/products/MrCreepyPasta-plush. Or you know what's easier? Makeship.com. There you go. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who is supporting me on Patreon. A huge thank you to patrons, such as Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Brian Arce, Bobby Karman, Stephanie Butler, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, William King, Heather McDonald, Reaper61167, Alex the Sandwich, Darth Miver, Michael Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Ness69420, aisodoehtraed with 2 exclamation points, Nessie, Ronnie Hansen, BardoHawk764, Melancholy Corpse, Ferb, Harley, Billy Morrow, Madam Skullbunny, Sashi Sazaku, Grizzly Olsen.pro, Kayden the Spooky Boy, Zane Nightshade, MyBodySoundsLikeRiceKrispys, Ashwood, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Miss Xandra, Mr. Unsettling Spaghetti, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Azarine Fox, Fried Chicken 12, Freddy Krueger, Ty Nanny, Michael Scarborough, Infernal One, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Jordan Nels, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Fester's Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nina Smith, Nico Cayo, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, Trey Smiles, and Corey Kenshin. Thank you guys so much, so much for being a part of the Patreon and helping me keep the lights on and helping me get exclusive stories and everything that we do on the channel here. It really means so much to me. I hope you all have a very happy Halloween and sweet dreams.